Girlcott, Chapter 6. Eileen did not spend the night, nor did she call to give a reason for not coming. I finally called her. "I'll be able to come before church and spend Sunday night," she said in a whisper. "Is something wrong? You always spend the weekend here, and we're supposed to work on my birthday." "I'll see you tomorrow." The phone gave a whining hum when she hung up. Eileen did not turn up for church as promised, and by afternoon I was so restless that even working on maths puzzles did not settle my mind. I called several times. The response was a busy signal. Finally, I gave up and went on the veranda, curled up in the Adirondack chair, and allowed the soothing western June breeze to calm my nerves. I must have fallen asleep, for I suddenly sat upright when I heard a loud, screechy voice coming from the direction of the dining room. It was Eileen, and she was shouting at Mama. Mama's soothing voice punctuated hers, but I couldn't understand what the conversation was about. Jumping up, almost upturning the chair, I ran to the door and was almost knocked back against the veranda wall when Eileen rushed past me and flopped down in the chair I had just vacated. "I've had enough of Nona," she said through clenched teeth. "She's the most selfish sister in the world." I didn't say anything. Eileen was always having problems with her older sister, but this time she looked as if someone had shot her out of a cannon. Her ponytail was untidy, and she wore a faded pair of Bermuda shorts and a flowered blouse with brown stains that failed to blend in with the pattern. "What's Nona done this time?" I sat on the edge of the chair and put an arm around her shoulder. With eyes almost popping out of her head, Eileen began talking so fast that I had to concentrate real hard to understand what she was saying. Mom's people had a dinner party at the last minute, and she had to go to work. And it was Nona's turn to stay with Marvin, but she stayed out all night, and when she finally came home, she said she had a date and she was not going to do any babysitting, so we had a big fight, and I walked out, and now I'm worried about Marvin. A deep sigh brought the long sentence to an end. At the moment, Mama came onto the veranda with a glass of root beer. She handed it to Eileen and patted her cheek. I shifted on the arm of the chair, feeling guilty about thinking of my birthday plans when my best friend had an ongoing problem with the worst sister in the world. "God promises a safe landing, not a calm passage," Mama said, her voice as soothing as a lullaby. "Marvin won't always be a little fellow, and you'll one day be in a position to help the family." Eileen smiled up at Mama, took a sip of the root beer, and said, "I hope so. Nona thinks I'm Mommy's favorite because I stayed in school while she had to go out to work. She keeps throwing that up in my face. She told me today that it's time I got a job because she's tired of slaving away while I do nothing but talk about being a lawyer." "She's got some nerve," I blurted out. "You won the Gibbons Scholarship, and that paid for your education. She didn't want to go to high school." I wanted to add that Nona couldn't wait to go to work in that hairdresser's parlor so she could spend money on clothes and do up her hair and all those stupid styles. "Don't worry about Nona," Mama said. "Now that you've finished high school with good grades, she probably wished she had done the same thing." Mama was right, but I didn't admit that aloud, for although I did not like Nona's ways, I was not allowed to criticize her publicly because Mama was against family division. This did not prevent Eileen and me from discussing Nona's bad attitude, for I had experienced her behavior personally and would never forget the incident. It was way back in elementary school when Eileen and I first became friends. She took me to her home to visit her folks. Mrs. Richards immediately embraced me as one of the family, and although I don't see her much because of her work hours as a domestic, she told me to call her Auntie Carol the way Eileen addresses Mama. Benny likewise became like a big brother, and I adore little Marvin, the baby brother I always wanted, but not Nona. The first time she met me, she looked me up and down and said, "I give you 4% for looks and Eileen 40%. Then she threw back her hair and added, "I'm rated at 100%. That should be obvious." "It's also obvious that 100 would be too high for your IQ results," I came back at her. "Judging by your intelligence, a 4 would be too generous." Eileen so enjoyed what she called my perfect squelch that she told Mama, but Mama didn't see any humor. All she said was, "A fool speaks, the wise man listens." Mama was always trying to console poor Eileen when she was upset with Nona, and tonight was no exception. "That horrible sister keeps ribbing." Eileen sighed and looked at me. "All I hear every day is that I eat up all the food and put nothing down. I wish I could get a good scholarship like this and go straight to college to study to become a lawyer." "You deserve it." Papa's frame suddenly blocked the front door, but he did not step out onto the veranda. My eyes swept over his light blue seersucker suit and his navy blue bow tie. His mouth was squeezed to a pucker. This was not a good omen. Do you folks realize we should be getting ready for church? He thrust out his wrist, looked at his watch, and then over at the three of us, Mama first, me next, and then Eileen, who was still hunched over in the chair. I looked down at my feet, bracing myself for what was to come next. I didn't realize it was so late, Mama said, her voice still calm as she gave Eileen a quick pat on the shoulder. She then looked at Papa and smiled. It won't take me long to get ready. Her head then turned in my direction. I think Desma can miss tonight's service. She already heard young Timothy preach this morning. Papa's head pivoted from me to Mama and from Mama back to me as though he was watching a ping-pong match. When he spoke again, his voice rumbled like thunder. What's that got to do with anything? When did we make church negotiable? Without answering, Mama began to rub Eileen's shoulders, and then she gave Papa a long look with eyes and mouth forming parallel lines. He glanced over at Eileen as if seeing her for the first time. They rested on her slumped shoulders and downcast eyes. Dora, just don't make me late for church. He threw the words at Mama and disappeared into the house. We all laughed, scattering the tension around us. Papa looked embarrassed because he thought he had interrupted a female conversation. Eileen and I were still on the veranda when my Papa left for church. Mama in the front seat, she was waving her hands back and forth, but Papa's ramrod back, as he drove out of the lane, was a sign that they were quarreling, and this was unusual for my parents. A heavy lump settled in the pit of my stomach. That boycott is messing up everything, I said to Eileen, thinking about the Wallaces and my change of birthday plans. I expected Eileen to answer, but she was curled in a fetal position in the large wooden chair and didn't look up when I spoke to her. I was sitting on the veranda wall, my legs stretched out, almost touching the opposite end. I closed my eyes and inhaled the pungent smell of the ladies of the nightbush that grew in the garden below, and listened to the shrill chorus of the whistling frogs nearby. Life elsewhere was going on as usual, even though my world was shattering into a million pieces. This boycott's just a rumor. Why should you let it spoil your party? I opened my eyes when I heard her voice and noticed she was sitting on the edge of the chair. I can't see Uncle Lionel taking the rumor seriously. I know how Papa is about the law. What law? There's no law against where you can sit in the theaters. Actually, there's no law against segregation in Bermuda. It's just a stupid policy, and we've fallen for it. What's that again? I jumped off the wall and stood facing her. Where did you get that nonsense from? Segregation is the law. Everybody knows that. Everybody's wrong. You can sit anywhere you like in the theaters. You can't get arrested as long as you don't disturb the peace. In the big hotels and restaurants, that's a different story. Those places are private, and the owners can keep you out because of the Hotel Keepers Protection Act. Never heard of it. It affects mostly tourists because they're the ones who use the hotels. Jews aren't allowed either, only rich white Americans. How do you know about all this? I was impressed, but I shouldn't have been because Eileen is as serious about becoming a lawyer as I am about being an actuary. I heard about the act 2 years ago when one of the colored lawyers tried to fight against it in the House of Assembly. He said it was embarrassing to Bermuda to keep out colored people and Jews. What happened? Most of the white MCPs voted against doing away with the act. She shrugged her shoulders and added, I forgot about it until Benny's incident at the Playhouse Theater. Benny? What incident? What are you talking about? Eileen dropped her head for a moment, then slowly looked up at me. It happened around exam time, and I just didn't dwell on it, that's all. What happened to Benny? My throat felt dry and scratchy. It's nothing serious. He went to the Playhouse Theater and sat down in the white people section. He did? What happened? I couldn't imagine any colored person being so bold, least of all quiet Benny. He went into the Playhouse Theater, sat in the white people section, Eileen repeated. You said that before. What happened? Eileen had a bad habit of dragging a story around by its tail. As soon as he sat down, an usher came and told him he had to move. Eileen? Okay. Benny had no idea he was sitting in the white people's side, so he didn't move. He told the usher that he liked where he was sitting. So she went out and came back with a young white English policeman. He must have been new to Bermuda, for when the usher explained the problem, he looked puzzled. What happened? I was frightened for Benny. That's the interesting part. The policeman pulled out a book from his pocket and leafed through it several times. Then he told Then he turned to the usher and told her that there was no law saying Benny had to move. Eileen smiled so wide I swore her dimples made popping sounds on her cheeks. Sitting in the white people's section is a de facto law. You can't get arrested for that. My friend was now in her element. That doesn't make sense. Why would the progressive group go through all the trouble of having a boycott when people can just go in the theater and sit where they like? Eileen shrugged. That's because they're not Bermudians. A Bermuda group would have known the difference between a de facto law and a de jure one. When I looked puzzled, Eileen explained. A de jure law is obvious. You know you can't ride your motorcycle without a license. There's a law against that. An idea suddenly slammed against my brain. If there's no law against sitting where you like in the movies, we can go in and sit where we like, boycott or no boycott. We can't cross the picket line. It's dangerous. I was determined to find a solution. This new information was too good to be true. Eileen, we can find a way of getting into that theater without crossing the picket line. But I could tell my friend did not share my enthusiasm. If we do get in, where's the money coming from to pay for the whole class? Your papa's not going to pay. I'll pay. I have money on my post office account. You're not talking about that money the church gave you when you were 7. How far do you think that would go? It was my turn to feel triumphant. Oh, I have more than that. I've saved babysitting money, birthday money, and lucky you, I forgot all about that. I slapped my hand against my forehead, feeling guilty that I had a savings account when my friend barely had spending money. Her father had walked out on the family 2 weeks after her baby brother Marvin was born, and Benny was left to help support the family. Eileen came from around the chair and sat close to me. I shouldn't have said that. You deserve everything you have, even the way you got that church money. This time we both had to laugh. I used to be embarrassed when my parents made it a point to tell their friends about me and the hymn board at church. When I was a little girl and they took me to church, I would add up the numbers on the hymn board thinking that they were sums for the congregation to do before the service started. When I found out that 637 was Amazing Grace, 425 was Lead Us, Heavenly Father, Lead Us, 826 was Oh Jesus, I Have Promised, and 178 was Holy, 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 I burst into tears because I had managed to get the right answer and had proudly showed Reverend Matters that I was the first person at church to finish adding up the sums before the service started. He mentioned me in his sermon as a little one who already knew how to share her talent. I received £2, 10 shillings from a special collection, and Mama opened an account at the post office. At least that started my savings, and now I have enough money in that account to pay for the class. A thought crossed my mind. I was so excited I almost danced off the veranda. Didn't Benny have a girlfriend who used to clean the Island Theater? She might know of a way to get us into the theater without crossing the picket line. The phone rang. The piercing blast made me jump a record-breaking high. I rushed into the kitchen, picked up the receiver, my thoughts still whirling around with Eileen's information. They vanished when a voice yelled into my ear, I want to speak to Eileen now. It's Nona. Eileen had followed closely behind me. I handed over the phone knowing this was not good. My prediction was dead on. I have to go home, Eileen said after a brief one-sided conversation. Nona's boyfriend is coming over to take her to a party. Nobody's home to look after Marvin, so she's leaving him home by himself. She can't. He's too small to be left alone. She knows that, so I've got to go home now. How can you get home now? My parents won't be back from church until late. There's a reception after the service, and that can go on for a long time. I've got to go now. Nona means what she says. Poor Eileen's unhappiness had returned. I looked in the direction of the window and noticed with dismay that the window panes were now painted black with the brush of nightfall. There's only one solution, I said when I saw she was close to tears. The next few words fell from my tongue like fireballs. We'll just have to take my mobilette. I hoped she had a better plan and would remind me about breaking the law. There's nothing de facto about me riding my mobilette without a license. You're right. Your mobilette's our only chance. Let's go. She rushed towards the kitchen door and held it open, but I couldn't move. I can't, Eileen. I just can't take the chance. I looked away from the agony on her face. The thought of losing my precious mobilette on top of all the other disappointments was too much to even think about. Then I remembered that Nona had left little Marvin alone once before, and he was almost struck by a car when he ran into the main road looking for her. Let's go, I told Eileen, saying the words quickly before I changed my mind. Marvin's more important than my mobilette. For that moment, I truly believed what I said, and like a martyr going to the gallows, I followed Eileen out of the house with heavy steps.